Good afternoon, everyone. Friday the 13th, 2018, April 13th, 2018, and we're back with a stream that had failed earlier this week due to some technical difficulties at the location I was at. And we're trying some new things today to hopefully avoid those sort of difficulties. I have two very prestigious guests with me today, gentlemen who are experts in their respective fields. We've seen both of them here on the program before, and I'm delighted to welcome back Paladin and Dr. Rudd. Gentlemen, how are you today?
I'm great, Jason.
Okay, good. Really happy to have you guys. I apologize, there seems to be, I hope the stream is working well on Patreon. It's saying the event hasn't started yet. That's not good news. Why is that? Connect, support, upload. Well, we're always trying to improve things here, and sometimes that's a little difficult. I see it was set to 4:30, but that's my mistake. I'm so sorry to our patrons on Patreon. Boy, just so hard to get everything right. Well, that's what people love to do to try to screw us up, Doctor and Paladin, is to throw a lot of things our way, and sometimes I do make mistakes. My deepest apologies to the Patreon subscribers. I promise everyone, we do have a new system set up for Patreon that'll be working very soon, trying to get all the kinks out of the system. But let's go right into what we're going to be discussing today. Paladin, you've been preparing for us an extremely comprehensive overview of the autopsies. And of course, we've looked quite a bit at the FIT report from the Las Vegas Metropolitan PD. We had received 58 autopsies just a few weeks ago. Paladin, why don't you tell us what you've been doing since those autopsies were released?
Okay, first of all, I want to thank Dr. Rudd for being here. I know a lot of the people that I've been working with and some people that I've been talking with are very excited that we were able to get you here, Dr. Rudd. So I just want to express my gratitude and appreciation for you being here to bring your expertise to this show, because I think it's very important that we hear from the medical side what your opinion is of the autopsy analysis that I'm going to present today. So thank you, Dr. Rudd, for being here.
Sure.
Now also, Paladin, for people who maybe haven't seen Dr. Rudd before, I'd like to remind everyone that Dr. Rudd spent many years as the chief medical examiner in Lake County, Illinois. And Dr. Rudd, of course, is a medical doctor. He is a pathologist. And that is an important contrast to John Fuddenberg, who is the coroner there in Clark County, but he is not an MD. Clark County happens to be one of the counties in the United States where the coroner is appointed rather than elected. And additionally, he does not need to be a medical doctor there in Clark County. And Dr. Rudd, you've told us in the past your opinion that this is an outmoded and not good way for a medical examiner's office to be run.
Yes, that's correct. Unfortunately, there are not enough pathologists to fill the coroner position. Otherwise, they would all, and if there were enough pathologists trained in forensic deaths, you'd have a medical examiner system throughout the United States. As an example, the state of Illinois has 102 counties, and there is only one medical examiner, because there's not enough. So if you multiply that by 49 other states and their counties, you can see it would probably be over 10,000 counties, and there's only 500 forensic pathologists in the nation. So that's why we have an antiquated system,
right?
Because there's just not enough forensic pathologists.
And doctor, would you say that one of the flaws of this system where a non-MD can be appointed to the position of coroner, does that introduce the possibility that perhaps someone who might be complicit, and we're not suggesting that this has occurred, but does it introduce the possibility where someone who has not taken a Hippocratic oath and someone who might be inclined to just make a particular determination that maybe isn't the most medically sound, does it open the door to that sort of thing?
A wide opening. It's a very, very wide opening of the door.
And I apologize if I'm leading the witness, but I agree with you. I think it's a substantial problem.
No,
That's okay.
It is, and it really doesn't matter if they're appointed or elected. You can have somebody not trained or somebody influenced by other branches of law enforcement. It doesn't matter whether you're elected or appointed. The thing with appointments, of course, it's harder to get rid of them, whereas elections, it takes 4 years, or every 4 years you can get rid of them. But either way, it is prone to not getting the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
Absolutely. Okay, so we're going to get right into Paladin's report, and of course, people who are familiar with Paladin know that they can read about him and see his research at whitehatsreport.com. Paladin, I apologize for being so verbose. Please take us on the journey through the analysis that you've done.
Okay, no worries, Jason. While we're on this subject about the appointment versus being elected, Dr. Rudd, on the situations where they're appointed, who appoints them?
Well, it can vary. It can be a county board. It could be a sheriff. It's a multiplicity of ways of being appointed.
Okay.
There's no one set. Most likely it's a county board with the sheriff participating, or it could strictly be the sheriff if the law is written that way.
Okay. All right. Okay. So I've gone through all 58 autopsies. Well, I've also reviewed Paddock's. We'll get to that later. I've gone through all 58 autopsies. I've scheduled them on a spreadsheet. And I'm a licensed private investigator. I've had probably, I don't know, 12 to 15 cases where I have been, I've been in a position where I've assisted an attorney who is defending his client who has been charged with murder. So I have reviewed probably 12 to 15 autopsies in that capacity. I've also had a few cases, life insurance cases from insurance companies where you have to basically go to the coroner's office and review autopsies because you know how the life insurance people are. They want to make sure the person is dead before they write that big check. So I do have some experience reviewing autopsies, and it's been confined to the LA County Coroner in LA, California. So, but I've never been involved, Dr. Rudd, and I don't know if anybody has, in such a wide expanse of 58 autopsies, of a mass casualty event where the coroner's office has been deluged with 58 bodies that they're having to perform an autopsy. And so my first question, I just kind of want to go through some questions here as far as procedures, protocols, so that everybody, the listeners and myself, understand exactly how this should be performed, so that we can then compare the results of what I've done with the analysis to the way it should be done. Now, my first question is it normal for a county to prepare, I don't know, an emergency action plan or a disaster plan for evidence or for events that may occur, something like this, where they would come to you at Lake County and say, okay, Dr. Rudd, we need you to submit to us an emergency action plan in the event that we would have some natural disaster or we would have a terrorist strike or whatever, where you would have an inordinate amount of casualties that you would have to process through your office.
Yes. Virtually every county should have that. It may not necessarily always originate from the coroner's office. Could be a disaster planning committee within the county, or the sheriff, or or some other branch, but there will be a disaster plan committee form or act that will delegate how to handle it. Generally, it'll come out of the coroner's office, but sometimes it'll come out of other branches of law enforcement. So every county should have one, especially since 9/11.
Okay. And so in that event, would you then become involved with securing other pathologists from other jurisdictions to come in and assist with the autopsies? Would that be part of the plan?
Yes, it would be part of the plan, and that's probably the hardest part of the plan, because you'd have to get pathologists locally, and then from the next state, and from the maybe elsewhere. It's very difficult, especially happens with plane crashes. The 50 shot
right.
is a large number for shooting, but as far as a plane crash, we had one in 1979 in Chicago.
Right.
And then you got 200 people, and so you have to try to find somebody. And generally, not always the case, but pathologists will work around the clock.
Right.
So
right.
That's one of the hardest things to do, is to get enough pathologists.
And of course, you've said that many times in our previous conversations, Doctor. In your view, this is one of the biggest problems faced in your field, is the paucity of the lack of pathologists throughout the country. And I presume this is because most people who go into the medical profession, it's a little difficult to be dealing with dead people, right?
Yeah, that's very true. Now, let me do say this. One does not necessarily have to do an autopsy within a day or two of the crime or the accident, okay? Because basically, what you're going to do is, as you're trying to find the number of pathologists, you're going to also try to find a number of places you can store the deceased, which is generally funeral homes, okay? Because no coroner's office or even the ME office can hold mass casualties, because in Cook County they can hold 300, but they're mostly filled with natural deaths. So all of a sudden a plane goes down, you've got all these natural deaths in there, so you're not going to have enough room. So you do have a contract with nursing homes to handle that. So basically what you do is you can get enough people out there to examine the scene, and then make sure that nothing is disturbed, photographs are taken, identification is made as to how somebody died, et cetera, et cetera. Was it a beheading in a crash? Was it a chair through the heart? Whatever. And so once you document the site of the decedent, you can take them anywhere and store them, and then take your time doing the autopsies, because once they're in the refrigerator, you certainly can do a good autopsy even a week or two later.
Okay, yeah, I got a couple of questions on that part. Now, with the securing of other pathologists, is that when you prepare your disaster plan, I guess for lack of a better term, or emergency action plan,
Correct.
do you actually contact those pathologists ahead of time?
Yes,
or is that
a disaster plan. No, there's a disaster plan, obviously made ahead of time, and we'll use the example in Illinois. The ME, the medical examiner of Cook County, will put together a disaster plan, because most of the major airports are in Chicago. So there's a disaster plan, and they let it be known that we have a disaster plan, and any pathologist that wants to join the plan is offered to join the plan, and they're put on the call list. And we used to have 2 or 3 disasters done each year, practice disaster plans. So
Okay.
There is a list of pathologists, and they take as many as they can. Okay, I mean, most pathologists, if they're doing autopsies or working in coroner's offices, would gladly join, because it's something they feel they owe. Plus, experience like that is important to get under your belt. So yes, in Cook County, there is a list of individuals that they will call with a disaster and who have joined the plan. They openly say, yes, I'd be happy to participate.
Okay. And in that situation, if these pathologists are outside the state of Illinois, do they have to then get licensed in the state of Illinois to be able to come in and perform autopsies in that event?
Most of the pathologists that'll be on staff in Cook County will be within the state.
Okay.
I'm not sure how the state of Illinois works with accepting other physicians from other states. I'm drawing a blank on that.
Okay.
But let me say this: if it is required that you need to be licensed in Illinois, you certainly would have to be. Okay.
Right. And you would have to go through that process prior to the event happening. In other words, if you put a call out and some doctors indicated that they wish to participate, and if they weren't licensed in the state of Illinois and that was a requirement, then you would then have to say, okay, you're going to have to get licensed in our state so you can be on our call list. Is that correct? I mean, is that pretty much the way it goes?
Yes, exactly right.
Okay. And the reason I'm asking this is because we had 6 pathologists in Las Vegas. 2 of them were assigned, two of the 6 were assigned to the Clark County Coroner's Office. The other 4 came from other states. So that's why I'm asking him. I'm just trying to get an idea, a feel for how this would have all come about, because they were all licensed, by the way. I did check their licenses, and when we get to this other sheet, a recap sheet, we'll see that. I put together their affiliations, their experience, their fellowship, their board certifications, where they graduated from, and some other information. So, okay, and I just wanted to be clear on that. So basically, these people would have already been picked ahead of time. So all you got to do, you got a disaster, you pick up the phone, you call them, and you say, okay, we need you here as soon as you can get here, essentially.
That's correct. That's correct. Optimally, if you're going to have a plan, people sign on. You give them various numbers. You give them your contact points. You give them all the information that's necessary. Once you're part of the team, you're expected to come in, if possible, when plan is activated.
Okay. And under that scenario, would they be compensated not only for the work that they're doing, but also for their expenses to get there and while they're there?
They certainly would be paid for their expenses to get there, but that could be done voluntarily, or most likely they would be billed fee for service, whatever their charges are. They would bill.
Okay.
And that should be set up also ahead of time. In other words, these individuals would say, well, these are my fees, and they would be accepted and then brought on. If the fees were considered excessive, most likely they would not be part of the team.
Okay. All right. So we've got that covered. Now I want to go through the process of how your office identifies bodies, how you process them from the beginning until you get them to the place of performing the autopsy. Now, one thing I wanted to cover here, you said that sometimes when there's a mass casualty event and you don't have room at the coroner's office to store the bodies, you take them to funeral homes, and the funeral homes or the other locations where you take them, do they have the proper facilities to, I guess, keep the body cold, refrigerated?
I would have to say that the funeral homes, in the vast majority of cases, are equal to medical examiners or coroner's office, and in some cases better.
Okay. Because of the embalming process?
Correct. And the fact that they do such a large number. I mean, sadly, people die every day, and, certain funeral homes do better business, so they have to have the ability to store the deceased. Yes, thank God we have funeral homes, because the mass casualty, they become very, very important. And they also are part of the team, and they also have contracts with the county. I know we did. And even now, I'm no longer in office, but we were considering using the funeral homes for body pickup, because some of our deputy coroners were injuring themselves because they're not as good as some of these funeral director people who know how to move bodies. So yes, funeral homes are part of the armamentarium of handling a disaster, and they are contracted with to do it.
Okay. And would it be accurate to say that the keeping the bodies refrigerated until from the time of death till the time of autopsy is important?
Yes, and that's what they would be doing. And
Okay.
I could say something else. Also, some of these funeral homes are so good that you can actually perform the autopsy there safely.
Okay.
So, because in this country, the funeral home is actually the coroner's autopsy suite. A friend of mine works in Chico, California, and there is no coroner there. Excuse me, there's no coroner's office. The coroner in California usually is a sheriff, and they don't have a place in small towns where they devote strictly to an autopsy suite. So my friend, the pathologist there, has contracted with the major funeral home. So if there's a homicide, suicide, accident, or natural that has to be done by him, and the sheriff calls him up, he takes the deceased to the funeral home, and the autopsy is performed there. So in summary, some funeral homes are excellent to do the autopsies and can be done there safely.
Okay.
Doctor, quick question. I'm sorry to interject, Paladin. Stormy Patriot wants to know if at any time in your experience you've seen a dead body shrink by 3 inches, change its eye color and or earlobes.
Well, if it's a mass disaster in a plane, yes. Okay.
Because of the heat?
Certainly heat could, the heat could do that. Could also be massive exposure to radiation, be it a bomb or some sinister device that some country may use. I mean, we heard about some of our government people in Cuba that lost their hearing,
Right.
because the Cubans were playing some games. We still don't know why some of these people have lost their sense of balance and their hearing.
If this was possible
yes,
exposure to electromagnetic energy of some kind or some sort of weapon that goes beyond the standard understanding of ballistics, gunshots, etc. You're describing situations of extreme heat, chemical exposure, radiological, high energy types of things. Doesn't seem to match the situation with Stephen Paddock.
And even various poisons that are given can do that. Specific poisons or specific bacteria, weaponry bacteria, like what is used in Syria.
Interesting.
They can shrink the body and change colors of certain parts of the body. There's a lot of evil stuff out there that we don't even know about.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Now, could you briefly take us through the process of when the coroner is called to the scene of where there's a dead body or a dead body, and how you handle that body from the time that you take possession of it at the scene, whether it would be, say, at the hospital or at the scene of the crime or the scene of the death, until the time that the autopsy is performed? Just briefly. Well, as far as how you identify it.
Yeah, I know. It's a near impossibility. I'll try to make it quick. When I sat down and wrote down everything, I didn't realize it would be this long. Okay. All right. So first of all, I'll try to make it quick. First of all, you get the call. You get the call in from whatever branch of law enforcement. They tell you there is a massive casualty, and it involves this or this or this. Is it a bomb? Is it a plane? Is it a shooting? Okay. So the first thing you do is you gather your team of assistant deputy coroners. In my case, it would have been 7. You start. Every truck we have that goes out to the scene has its investigative tools and equipment. Then you get to the scene. The first thing you do is introduce yourself, identify yourself to the police, introduce your other people. You don't have to necessarily tell them what your role is. They know who you are. Okay. Next thing, you assume nothing that has been done by the police. You just assume it. It probably has been. And I'm talking about scene safety. So you make sure things are safe. Okay, you go in there, is it a chemical attack? Is there a gun someplace? Is there a bomb someplace? So you go in there, you establish scene safety. All right, then you get to the decedent and you confirm or pronounce the death. Okay, and then you meet with the people, the attending agency that is there. So the cop that found them or whoever found the sheriff, you discuss it. Okay, you conduct a scene walkthrough. In other words, tell us, law enforcement, what did you do when you got here? Now, as I'm saying this is all being written down or documented or taped. Okay, then you establish a chain of custody. Okay, so if you're going to send out a bullet, you're going to send out a weapon, you make sure that there's a chain of custody. Somebody has to sign for it. Obviously, it's been photographed. Something else that you have to know, you have to know the laws in the area related to collection of evidence. So know your laws so you don't screw up. Okay. Then once you've done that, you start documenting the scene. You photograph the scene. You develop a descriptive documentation of the scene. You establish a probable location of the injury or illness of the decedent there. Okay, so if it's obvious, you document it. As an example of how important that is, when Lieutenant Glinowitz killed himself and tried to pass it off as a homicide, we didn't know how he died at the scene. Hard to believe. He's dead. He's got blood out of his mouth, but we don't see a bullet. Well, that's because his vest was skin tight, and we weren't going to remove it until we get to the autopsy. Okay, so you don't necessarily start taking things apart at the scene. Okay, so you locate where the injury is. Okay, you collect, you do inventory of all the property and evidence around him as you bring it in, and then if there are witnesses, you interview them. Okay, you interview them. All right, and then you take them to the coroner's office, and then once they're there, I can tell you what we do there. But right now, that's what you do at the scene.
Okay, now do you put them in a body bag and you seal the body bag at the scene?
Generally you do if you have one, but you don't necessarily have to have one. But 99 times out of 100, there will be a body bag. It's the only safe way to move anybody.
Okay.
Yes, you should have one.
Okay, and do you leave them with their clothes on?
Yes, we try to keep the body as you found it.
Okay.
As long as you establish it's safe to do. Obviously, if you find a poison or a gun, there's something that could hurt somebody in the process of moving, yes, you would remove it, yes.
Okay, now when do the toe tags get put on the body that identify, because in the lost...
Right. Well, the key to that is you have to know who they are. So if it's a major catastrophe, and a lot of times you won't be able to identify somebody right then and there, you'll obviously do it at the coroner's office. Now, if you identify somebody via driver's license, you'll obviously make sure that driver's license stays with that individual. But most of the IDing, the actual toe tagging, would be done wherever they're taken to be stored and operated on.
Okay. All right. Let's move now to the autopsy. Normally, when you do an autopsy, when a pathologist does an autopsy, are there others who assist in the process? And I don't mean the ones who take the pictures or the ones who do the x-rays, but somebody, an assistant that would assist the pathologist in doing the autopsy?
Yes, it can be one of two ways. I'll just discuss it how we do it in Lake County.
Okay.
In Lake County, we try to make our deputy coroners a full-service job. In other words, they not only go to the scene to document where the decedent dies, but they also deliver the body back to the coroner's office. Once they do that, they come in and then they do the IDing of the person as they're brought in, either via fingerprints, dental records, or there's an ID on them, okay, and it looks like them. We can also do DNA analysis, and I think I meant dental. I said dental. And if it's case they're so badly destroyed, we will do forensic anthropology and try to determine the sex and age of an individual. But generally, my deputy coroners did everything. Now, in some cases, like in Cook County, they send out an actual investigator. He's not necessarily called a deputy coroner. He's an investigator. He'll go out to a scene and investigate the matter. In Cook County, they have a service that brings them back. And then once they get operated on, the forensic autopsy, they have something called a diener at Cook County. Diener means an assistant. In Lake County, as I mentioned before, my deputy coroner also acts as a diener. The advantage that we had in Lake County with the deputy coroner doing everything, meaning going to the scene, documenting the scene, bringing them back and assisting, is that any questions a pathologist has, he asks his deputy coroner, making it easier.
Okay.
So there's two ways. You can use your deputy coroner, or you can have a professional called a diener, which is a highly trained individual, some of them making as much as $90,000 a year.
Okay. Now, okay, and let's focus now on gunshot wounds, because all these victims were gunshot wound victims. So let's focus in on how you would handle gunshot wound victims. Now, in this kind of a situation, would you normally, well, let's say, how often, what percentage, however you can give us an idea of the autopsies that you would do on gunshot victims, would you have law enforcement observing the autopsy? Is that normal? Is it unusual? Is it half the time, all the time, some of the time? Just to get an idea.
Okay. Technically, it should be all of the time.
Okay.
Okay. Technically, because a gunshot wound can be a homicide, and obviously that means there would be a prosecution, whether they're alive or not.
Right.
Okay. We have in Lake County something called a major crime task force. Okay, because some police departments, if there is a murder, are so small they don't really have the means to do a full scale investigation. So in Lake County, they put together various police from various police departments, and they get called in to do it. When we have a murder, they go out to the scene, we meet them there, and then they come back and they assign at least 2 up to 4 people to stand in the autopsy room and watch it. And also, we give them the evidence we find that they can do analysis on, more specifically the the bullets. Or
right,
casing.
the ballistics, okay.
Right, exactly. So as we're removing it, we're preparing the bags, chain of evidence. They're accepting it. They sign it, and they take it to the police lab. Yes, you should have law enforcement there to watch and assist.
Okay. Now, just to kind of give an overall here, because you mentioned sort of an exception. Do you normally, I mean, there is, when you do an autopsy, you have certain things that you do, and you don't vary those procedures at all depending on the circumstances. You do everything the same every time, primarily. Is that correct?
Well, we got to be careful here. In case of a mass catastrophe, we're basically there to determine how the person died.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So we will do a complete autopsy, but in this case, we might not do everything that is absolutely necessary. For instance, we may not take the gonads out or something like that.
Right.
If there's a gunshot wound, you know where I'm going with that. So
yeah.
if we've got 100 bodies waiting outside, and we see a gunshot wound to a head and to the thorax, we're not going to worry about removing the testes. You see where I'm going?
But
basically, you try to do as complete an autopsy as possible.
Okay, but in that kind of situation, would you then be consistent with not doing certain things on all the bodies, as opposed to doing some?
Yes, assuming the where the gunshot is occurring. Yes.
Okay.
So the next body comes in and it's to the head and the chest. Yes, But if the
Okay.
gunshot wound is into the abdomen, obviously we would go down there and remove genitalia, the genital urinary tract.
Yeah, because typically I think going through these autopsies, there are some where they do full on internal exams where they do the Y incision and go in and take out the organs and weigh them and section some of them and send them off for histology. And then some they only talk about in the internal examination part, they only talk about the part of the body in which they actually tracked the gunshot wound and the trajectory and tried to go in and get ballistics evidence. So I just wanted to be clear on that. Okay. Now, are the photographs and X-rays taken before you actually begin the physical exam of the body? In most cases.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Unless you find something. Well, obviously you take photographs not only before you start, but during the process.
But the X-rays are
generally.
Yeah, go ahead.
Generally, X-rays are done in the beginning. However, if you find something really important, you will do an X-ray again.
Okay, and the X-rays in a gunshot wound victims basically can tell you where the bullets are. Is that correct?
Yeah, and that's very important because sometimes we know where it is, but we still can't find it as we're trying to cut, and so an X-ray will then be brought in, and then we go, aha, we're just a centimeter away, and we didn't know it.
Okay. Now, are fingerprints taken for every body that is brought in as a matter of course? Okay. And what about DNA samples? Are those only on the ones you can't identify, or are those done for everybody?
Well, let me put it this way: if somebody is missing for a week or two, they're going to be decomposed pretty much. And even if you identify by fingerprints, but you don't say, like, you have a head that is destroyed by being outside, so you can't do it. And if you have a driver's license on the body, and even if you have fingerprints ID them, for thoroughness and for insurance purposes, you would probably submit the DNA to be absolutely certain. Is it necessary? No. But in my case, I don't want to be wrong. So even if the fingerprints come up positive for the guy, I'll still send out the DNA because, it might be a wife and kids and a suicide, and they don't expect it, and they're not going to believe the fingerprints. So if we got DNA, that's rock solid.
Okay. And is it normal for you to mention if you do fingerprints, would you say that would you put that in the autopsy report that among all the tests that were done, would you indicate that they were fingerprinted in addition to when you're doing the external exam, would you reference fingerprint ink on their fingers?
Well, let me put it this way. The pathologist doesn't do the fingerprinting, so it will not be in his report. However, the deputy coroner who does it will have a sheet of paper saying, we did the fingerprints and it comes up this.
Okay.
So there should be an external report from the pathologist.
Okay.
Excluding what the pathologist does, there'll be another report of the fingerprint ID.
Okay. Now, when you do a full autopsy on a gunshot victim, I think the first thing that you do when you start your exam, do you do the gunshot wound first, or do you do the external exam first, if it matters?
Well, to be perfect, you'd start strictly with the external examiner. You don't go for the money. In other words, you don't say, "Oh, there's a gunshot wound. Let's document the gunshot wound and then do everything else." Well, that's not going to work.
Okay.
As an example, using the Glinowitz case. Okay, here we have an officer on the table, fully clothed. His uniform is in perfect shape. In other words, he looked like he fell over dead after roll call. In other words, there's no evidence of a fight. His clothes are perfectly situated. His bulletproof vest is skin tight. he's got a little dirt on his knees because he fell on his knees as he fell forward. And so we don't see what killed him. So what we do is we photograph it very carefully, the external body before removing anything. We the vest,
Clothes.
that, and the other.
You mean
yes.
clothes, right?
Right.
And that's important,
That's
is it
correct.
not? I mean, for you
Yes.
to receive the body
Yes.
clothed, because that will indicate all kinds of information that you may need, correct?
Yes. Let's use as an example. This officer had his bulletproof vest on. Had it been removed, well, let me back up. So he had his bulletproof vest, yet we didn't know where the fatal gunshot wound. There was a shot to the right lower abdomen that hit his bulletproof vest, but didn't penetrate, so that didn't kill him. So when we removed the vest, lo and behold, there was a gunshot wound that killed him because it hit the heart and lungs 2 inches below the top of the vest.
Uh-huh.
Now, that means the gun had to be shoved in there and
Right.
pointed downward. Okay, if that vest is removed before we see that, we could
You don't know that.
postulate that he.
Yeah.
Correct. We said, well,
Yeah.
we don't know that.
Excellent.
So we just took away the possibility of a suicide. Not definitely, but certainly reduced it. But with
Sure.
a vest on, how does somebody get a gun under
Right.
the vest, angled at 45 degrees, without the officer fighting the assailant?
Right.
Okay,
And
so
that's
when I saw that, I said, this most likely is a suicide. Yet the cops didn't want to agree with it because for other reasons, and
Right,
that's a
right.
whole show in itself.
right. Okay. Yeah. All right. That makes a lot of sense. And I think because the body, everything on the body at the time they die is evidence. So I see that. All right. Now, in your report, what identifying information do you include? Do you include like the driver's license or the date of birth? I know I've listened to your another one of your interviews with Jason and I think Laura, where you indicated that the date of birth typically you put in there on the report. Is that correct?
Yes, what we do is we'll Xerox the driver's license or gun license or passport, and we'll have it with our report. The actual license will be retained for destruction because we don't want somebody using it.
Right.
So we'll keep it for a certain time period, meaning we will keep it until the case is signed out and there's nothing else to be done. Then we'll destroy it, but we'll have copies of it. The reason we destroy it is because we don't want it getting out of their office, whether it's legal or illegal, and then it's used. Okay, so we'll take the information off the license because we'll have a Xerox copy of it, and the original license will be destroyed.
And that information would then be put on the autopsy report. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's correct.
Okay.
When you start the autopsy, if you have the ID of the individual, you will put it in there, and you won't sign it out until you have an ID. So if you don't have a driver's license, you'll wait for the fingerprints, or you'll wait for the DNA, or you'll wait for the dental records. But yes, we will. That should be on the final report. Maybe not necessarily in the preliminary report because we may not have it.
Okay. Now, is the date of death always determined by the coroner?
Yes, it should be.
Okay. Are there are there any times where it would not be determined by the coroner? Any examples that you can think of?
No, it's mandated that we have to do it.
Okay.
It's mandated we have to do it.
And in cases where the coroner, where you do the date of death or the date of death, are you also responsible? I would assume you are, for the time of death too, as close as you can get it.
Yeah, correct. The time of death may be given to us by the law enforcement that finds them. Okay. So you can't pinpoint. You can't pinpoint. For instance, let's use an example. Somebody hangs himself. Well, the date of death the date and time of death is when law enforcement shows up.
Right.
They might have been hanging there for 2 days, but
correct.
As far as being found, if they hang themselves on Monday and we find them Wednesday, the date of death is going to be Wednesday.
Okay, because I know
because we can't accurately pinpoint the exact day of death.
Yeah, right.
Okay?
But so in other words, if you can pinpoint it yourself, you can do it. Otherwise, you would then rely on law enforcement and their investigation to give you the best estimate of perhaps when the time of death when it occurred.
Yeah.
Because
Well, let me just use as an example. A dead body's found. Law enforcement goes out there. They document the date and the time they found them dead. Then we show up,
right.
and we will get that information from them, or they'll give us a report.
Okay. Okay.
Right?
Because hold that thought, because I know you've gone through this before, but we're going to go through this again later on regarding Paddock. So I've got a lot of questions regarding that one. But anyway, we'll hold that for later. Okay. And normally when you're recording when you're doing your autopsy, do you record a start time and an end time on the autopsy report? In other words, you started it at 1755 and ended it at 2010, or do you just do a start time?
You can be OCD or anal retentive, and obviously you're going to put the date, and you should put a start time, but you don't necessarily have to do a finish time.
Okay. Okay. Now, big question. Based on the fact that you've got gunshot wounds, and typically we had, let's say, you just had one, so you got to track that wound. You've got to go through that process. You do an external exam, but you don't do an internal exam. About how long would that take for you to do that from beginning to end? Just
an external exam?
Yeah, the external. Yeah, the external, in addition to doing the examination for the gunshot wound, the tracking of that, what it destroyed, what was the cause? Because I'm assuming doing the gunshot wound, that essentially tells you what the cause of death was, because say it was in the chest or in the back, and the wound, the bullet penetrated the lungs, and the lungs filled up with blood, and or it hit the heart or whatever. Assuming that you did not do an internal exam except for tracking the gunshot wound, about how long would that kind of an exam take?
Well,
just roughly.
It's very dependent. Yeah, well, it varies. Anywhere from 15 minutes to 30 minutes, because I'm going to make an assumption here. If you're not going to do an internal exam, you're certainly going to have to photograph the hell out of it externally. Mm-hmm. But I will also say this. There's no reason not to do an internal exam. I can't imagine somebody just saying, "Oh, this guy got shot in the heart, and we're not going to cut him open."
Right.
So
okay.
if you're documenting a single gunshot and you're going to use a stick to penetrate the tract of the bullet, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes if it's a single shot and you're only doing an external.
Okay, and if you're doing then the head to toe external, where you're going through and you're documenting the tattoos and the scars and the other injuries, it still wouldn't take very much. It wouldn't take over 15 or 20 minutes.
Maybe 30 minutes. Again, I'm going to use my reference point as G.I. Joe. This guy had a huge number of tattoos, and they said specific things, and a lot of the stuff was written in Latin. He was Catholic, and so he put Latin prayers on there. So if you have an extensive amount of tattoos, it'll take a lot more time. Okay, and it may be even important if you're dealing with a gang leader, because that gang leader will have specific tattoos, right. And it might indicate something as to how he functioned as a criminal in society. Okay, so mm-hmm. I would say external exams with single gunshot, a maximum 30 minutes with photographs and documentation.
Okay, and what about you do a full internal exam? You do the Y incision and you do everything. How long would that take?
In the case of G.I. Joe, his entire exam, external and internal, well, let's say his external was 30 minutes. I would say at least 4 hours.
4 hours, okay.
Yeah, because don't forget, you're collecting data. See, right. You can't just do the exam in and of itself. You're doing an exam and pulling out bullets, or you're pulling out this, or you're pulling out that, and you're handing in, and you're gathering material for analysis. But I would say an average autopsy takes 1 to 2 hours.
Okay.
Someone is
Okay.
asking here, we've got Ali M wants to know if they would still x-ray the gunshot wound even if they didn't do a full autopsy on someone.
You would, it would be improper not to do a full autopsy on a gunshot wound. The only extenuating circumstances is if they were radioactive.
So in the case of the October 1st shooting in Las Vegas, you would expect a full autopsy on every decedent?
Yes, I would, and there would have to be extenuating circumstances as to why they didn't.
Okay.
I'd like to, I mean, if somebody gets shot, you should open that body up.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, the only time you don't do autopsies in terms of, they're not radioactive, they're not infectious, they're not this or that, they don't pose a threat, is an obvious suicide hanging. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
But if somebody shoots themselves in the head, you're going to cut them open. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
you're going to cut them open.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
Because a shooting is either a homicide or a suicide. It's rare that a hanging is homicide. Okay? I mean, it's rare. Okay,
Right.
there'll be someone will have to be drugged, or they'll be fighting. Okay, et cetera, et cetera. So yes, sometimes somebody hangs themselves. It's an obvious suicide. They leave a note. They've got a psychiatrist saying this guy's suicidal. You see where I'm going? It's obvious that this is a suicide. We do not need to cut.
Okay.
But in a gunshot wound, you should cut.
You should cut. Okay. So
Yep.
we should expect then to see that internal exams were done on all 58 victims. Is that what you're essentially saying?
That's correct. Unless there's extenuating circumstances, I'd have to hear about it to see if they're correct.
Okay. Okay. Understood. This is great information.
You're chuckling there, Paladin. I'm
we'll get to
eagerly
it.
anticipating the rest of the questions.
Yeah. Okay. So now one more question, and then we can get to the recap and the analysis. And I think we're going to get into the meat and the potatoes. Okay. So if you pick up the body and the body is taken for refrigeration, either at the coroner's office or at the funeral home, will the refrigeration of the body, will that affect the rigor mortis? Will that extend it? Will it?
Yes, it can. It certainly can. Generally, rigor mortis.
Talk to us about that. Yeah, talk to us about that if you could, just for a second. Rigor mortis, the time it takes for the body to go into rigor mortis, and then typically, if it's refrigerated, how long it would stay in rigor mortis before it would then come out of rigor mortis. Doctor, I've done a lot of research, and I've got so many conflicting information. I want to hear it from you. You're the expert.
Okay. The thing about rigor mortis is it's not the end all and be all in determining when somebody dies. Okay, that's number one.
Mm-hmm.
All right, rigor mortis can take anywhere from 1 to 3 hours to set in fully.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Now, with that said, the person then stays in rigor mortis for 24 to 48 hours, and then comes out of it. But listen, hear me out. Then comes out of it.
Mm-hmm. And words, how long would it take? They peak.
Yeah, how long would it take
to come? Yeah, to come from. Yeah.
Go ahead. I interrupted you. I'm sorry.
No. Okay. So 1 to 3 hours to set in fully, and then they're in full rigor for 24 to 48. Okay. So then, at what point after that? How many hours after that would they be then completely out of rigor mortis, where you would say rigor mortis has passed or it is absent? Does it take another 24, 12, 8 hours? Just in normal circumstances, if they're refrigerated?
Probably within 24 hours, they'll slowly start coming out of it. Yeah.
Okay, so
refrigeration would slow it up a little bit, but not much. I wouldn't worry about heat or refrigeration. Okay, it'll have some effect, but not a whole lot.
Okay, so based on what you're saying, then you would expect a body to be out of rigor mortis within 48 to 72 hours. Would that be an accurate statement?
Correct.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Let me just say this: rigor
Mhm.
mortis is more affected by the metabolic rate. Okay. In other words, if somebody was exercising before they died, then they build up a chemical called lactic acid, and therefore rigor mortis would actually start sooner. It could be less than 24 hours. Okay.
Okay.
And
Okay.
so it's sometimes it's more important what was going on in the body before they died.
Okay. Would alcohol affect the rate of rigor mortis?
I'll have to think about that because I know more about natural diseases. For instance, somebody dying with pneumonia and had a fever will develop rigor mortis sooner. I'm unclear. I'm trying to think if alcohol. I'm trying to think if alcohol creates lactic acid. It probably does as affects the liver. So I would assume that if somebody had alcohol, rigor mortis might set in sooner.
Okay. Now, liver mortis, well, I don't want to try to give you my explanation. Could you just briefly explain what
Guys,
liver mortis?
just to interject for a moment, according to campusprotein.com, alcohol can play a role in interfering with the breakdown of lactic acid. This causes your muscles to increase in soreness after physical activity, and alcohol damages amino acids.
Well,
Okay.
if that's true, then it might make rigor mortis take longer. If it's destroying lactic acid, then it might be longer. Remember, the more lactic acid, the quicker the rigor mortis. So if you're destroying the lactic acid, then the rigor mortis may set in normally. It may be the normal time. Okay.
Okay. Okay. All right. So,
now, as far as livor mortis, that's just the pooling of blood, in dependent portions of the body. So as you lie on your back, let's assume your back, you're going to have pooling in the buttock region and areas like that. But where the body is pushed against whatever, if they're on a table and the skin is pushed hard against the bone of the body, you won't get liver mortis there because the blood's not flowing. So the liver mortis would be just adjacent to where the body touches the table. That takes generally an hour. Now, you can have no livor mortis at all if you exsanguinate. So if you got no blood in your body, if you've got a big gaping gunshot,
right?
You got a big gaping gunshot wound and you bleed out, there's no livor mortis. You don't even have to have a big gaping one. If you got a big hole that hits the heart, you're going to bleed out.
Okay. Can I just interject again?
Yeah.
Could we quickly, for people watching who aren't familiar with these terms, could we go over those different stages of death and what liver mortis, rigor mortis, what all that means?
Okay, well, basically, the determination of the time of death or the interval between time of death and the body is found is actually very, very difficult. So what they've tried to do is use two methods of analyzing or trying to determine the cause of death. That is livor mortis, which means nothing but blood after death. Livor, blood, mortis, death. So the pooling of blood. So if you find somebody that you don't find pooling of blood, then it's probably less than an hour that they have died. Now, if you find somebody that has pooling of blood, then you know that it's at least over an hour. But you can't do any more than that with livor mortis. Again, livor mortis, blood pooling. Then there's something called rigor mortis. That is the stiffening of the body after death, and that generally takes between 1 and 3 1 or 3 hours, and it's highly dependent upon the internal temperature of the body. Was he exercising? Was he sleeping? Was it hot outside or not? That type of thing. But generally, it has to do with internal temperature, and that is the stiffening of the muscles in the joints. So that's what we're talking about. And you try to determine the interval of death, and when you find them, it's an inexact science, and you shouldn't put too much to it.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, Jason, if you want to pull up the first page of the 4-page Word document, I think we can get into now the results of the autopsy
Sure.
review.
Absolutely.
And okay, so what I want to go through here, Dr. Rudd and all the listeners.
And Paladin, can you see it there? Have I got the right document?
Yeah,
okay.
Yep, that's
Great.
right. Yeah. Okay, so what we have here is we had 6 pathologists to do 58 autopsies. So that's roughly 10 per pathologist if it was evenly split. However, it wasn't evenly split. We had 3 pathologists who did 50 autopsies. We had the other 3 pathologists who did 8 autopsies. Okay. Now, the 2 doctors who did the most, 21 and 15, were Jennifer Corneal, and Dr. Larry Sims. And I think on the screen there you can see their information as far as when they graduated from school, where they did their affiliations, where they did their experience in pathology, where they did their fellowship, and their board certifications. And then I've listed their autopsy numbers. Okay, so to me, Dr. Rudd, it seems interesting that they chose to bring in 4 additional pathologists. Those 4 additional pathologists did 22 autopsies, when the 2 pathologists that are on staff for the Clark County coroner did 36. And you actually had 3 other pathologists, Dr. Timothy Dutra, Lisa Gavin, and Alan Olson, who did not participate at all in the 58 autopsies. I thought that was very, very unusual, to say the least. 2 of these doctors were DOs, Doctor of Osteopathic Medicine. Is that unusual for a DO to be a pathologist, Dr. Rudd?
No, no. Doctors of osteopathy have been given full rights as being allowed to practice medicine.
Okay.
Okay. So an osteopathic doctor is equivalent to an MD, and they do take fellowships and residencies in pathology. Remember, it's just a degree you get from a school. So you're a doctor of osteopath or a medical doctor. Once you leave that, you go into regular training. So MDs and DOs do the same residencies and fellowships. So yes, you can have pathologists that are DOs.
Okay, and that's when they go into specialization. Is that correct? Once you become a doctor or a DO? Yeah.
Right. You leave medical school, you specialize. You leave osteopathic school, you specialize. There's no longer the AMA, no longer considers them lesser in terms of people that can treat people.
Okay. So the 6 pathologists, 2 are in Vegas, 1 in San Diego, 1 in Ann Arbor, Michigan, 1 in Fort Benning, Georgia, and 1 in Puerto Rico. 2 of them were DOs. Of the 6, 2 are currently in the military. That would be the one at Fort Benning and the one at Puerto Rico. Okay. Now, 2 of the 6 were foreign educated. One, Dr. Recaro, was educated in the Philippines. Dr. Marzad, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, was educated in Egypt, and he is currently assigned to the San Diego Medical Examiner's Office. Okay. All right, here we go for the recap.
Paladin, is it Marzad or Marzouk? Abu Bakr Marzouk?
I think it's Marzoud. I think it's Marzoud. It could be a K, but I think
we
it's
may have a typo here.
Okay, that could be my fault.
I've got a Dr. Abubakar Marzouk in Rockville, Maryland, who is a pathologist. Is that not the same guy?
I don't think it is. I think it's Marzoud. If you can pull up one of the autopsies, I can tell you which one. He only did 2. Let me see. Hang on, I'll give you one of his. Pull up number 4.
Okay, I'll do that while you guys talk, and we'll revisit that.
Okay, a question, Dr. Rudd, on the in the report, is it typical for you to describe the jurisdiction or the reason for jurisdiction? In other words, I guess it's primarily why are you doing the autopsy? Because I've got 4 doctors that Dr. Uribe, under the report section in opinion, says, you know, he basically says he or she was shot during a mass fatality incident at a concert venue. Dr. Hodge says the decedent was shot during a mass fatality event. Dr. Ruggiero, it is my opinion that death was caused by a gunshot wound to wherever the gunshot wound was, sustained during a mass fatality incident. But Dr. Marzoud goes into great detail. He says under his opinion section, he says, per LVMPD preliminary reports on 10/1/2017, concert goers were attending an outdoor music festival. At approximately 22:08 hours, numerous rapid-fire gunshots were heard and numerous individuals were struck with gunshots. It was determined that an individual, and he references the Clark County case number for Paddock, had opened fire from the 32nd floor of the Mandalay Bay Hotel and Casino across the street from the festival. Victims fled the scene, and numerous victims were transported to local hospitals. First responders later located the single suspect who was killed in a believed suicide. Is that unusual to go through that much detail, or even to mention what the incident was that created the death that you're doing the autopsy, or not? I'm just curious, because the two doctors from Las Vegas did not mention any jurisdiction in any of their 36 autopsies.
That is a subjective. That's subjective. You can put whatever you want. Now,
okay.
The individual, since he's out of town, is probably putting that in his report to refresh his memory if he gets called in to court.
Testify? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So it is subjective. You can put as much as you want. You can leave out as much as you want. And it's not an error or a poorly done autopsy if you do or don't.
Okay. Now, I did underline, if Jason's got this up, yeah, you're right, Jason. That's a K instead of a D. My bad on that.
No problem.
My bad. Okay. What I wanted to talk about here, the next thing was, of the 6 pathologists, only 2, Marzouk and Roquero, cited proper chain of evidence, i.e. the body bag was sealed, and the other 4 did not mention the body bag being sealed. Of the 6 pathologists, 3, Sims, Hodge, and Uribe, indicated victims had been fingerprinted. That's why I was asking the fingerprint question, because the other 3 doctors never mentioned that they were fingerprinted.
Well, some doctors will take it from the report that it was fingerprinted. Again, it is something that is subjective.
Okay.
And they can do it, or they can't do it, or not. They can't. They can do it, or they don't think it's necessary because there's other documentation that indicates they've been fingerprinted.
Okay. Now, some indicated, the way I was able to even pick this up, some indicated that while they were doing the external exam, they mentioned that they found fingerprint ink on the victim's fingers, and others put it in at the end as far as what kind of tests were run. They said the victim would have been fingerprinted. Now, of the 6 pathologists, Uribe was the only one who did not cite a date of death. And he did 3 autopsies, and he did not put a date of death. 3 doctors did not cite a time of death. 2 doctors did not cite a time of the autopsy. And there are 2 doctors who didn't. There were 58 autopsies done. There were 20, and we'll get to this. There were 27 victims who Roquero and Sims indicated that there was rigor mortis was either minimal or there was no rigor mortis was observed. And these were the only 2 doctors who had victims that did not have rigor mortis. And we'll go into that in detail later on. Of the 58 autopsies, only 2 were performed with witnesses, and those 2 were done by Dr. Marzouk. Of the 58 autopsies, 39 were performed on naked bodies. So the pathologist said basically in so many words, when the body was initially viewed, it was naked. 2 were performed on fully clothed bodies. Again, this is Dr. Marzouk, and 17 were not described. Only the doctor said that, he started the autopsy in the clothes. He gave a description of what the clothes consisted of. So in the 17, we weren't able to determine whether that was they were clothed or not. But I thought that was interesting that 39 indicated that they performed autopsies on naked bodies. They did not describe the clothes, whereas Dr. Marzouk did say they came in fully clothed. Only 16 of the 58 indicated chain of evidence, i.e. that they took the body out of a sealed body bag. 20 victims were fingerprinted. And I know this drove people crazy on the Joe Napoli interview because I was asking about the bracelets, because everybody at the concert had a bracelet. That was their ID to get in. The bracelets were scanned. And only 17 victims were cited by the doctors as having some type of bracelet. Of the 58 autopsies, ballistics evidence was recovered from 46. Of the 58 victims, 37 had additional injuries. Of the 58 autopsies, 27 had no internal exam performed at all, and 5 had very limited internal exams performed in relation to just where the gunshot wounds were. Of the 58 autopsies, 29 victims were in rigor. 8 were described as minimal. 15 were described as rigor mortis has passed, and 4 were described as rigor mortis is absent. Of the 29 victims in rigor mortis, the hours between time of death and time of autopsy range from 13 hours to 72 hours. The range for minimal or no rigor mortis was from 34 hours to 65 hours. Okay. Now, if you first, I want to do the FIT report too on page 3 or on page 4, Jason, the FIT report. The FIT report cites a time of death for all 58 victims. It lists them on the FIT report. It refers to the coroner's number, it gives their name, and it gives a time of death. But the autopsies only cite...
Paladin, where is that? Page 4 on the FIT report?
No. I'm citing page 4 on my report to you. On the FIT report, I believe it's several pages.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, they go through the listing of the people on the FIT report. And I'm looking at page 4 of my report to you, just the FIT report versus the autopsies. They have a time of death for the FIT report. What I didn't understand was, how can the FIT report cite a time of death for all 58 when the autopsies only cite a time of death for 26 victims? Any idea on that, Dr. Rudd?
Well, it's wrong. I can't believe it sounds like it's sloppy work. It's sloppy work. I mean, everybody there's a form to fill out. I mean, there's a template for autopsies that come from the county in which it's done. They should follow the template. There should be a list as to time and date, and not recognizing the bands on the arms is wrong. It should have been documented. It should have been photographed. A lot of the stuff that's absent sounds like sloppy work. I mean, it's a good thing I don't practice pathology anymore, because if this gets out, everyone will criticize me. But it's wrong. Every autopsy should have a very similar external exam. Okay. Now, if what they were wearing to get into the concert, was removed by somebody on the way there because they didn't think it was appropriate for the dead body, who knows what happens between picking up the body and taking it, and whether something's removed or not. I'm not sure, but what you're citing as to lack of description of rigor mortis, lack of description of this or that or the other, is just sloppy work.
Okay. All right. And then the second thing of the FIT report versus the autopsies indicated, because all the doctors they had a section in there where they cited evidence of medical treatment. So the autopsies indicated that 22 victims received medical treatment, yet the FIT report states 27 victims were transported to local area hospitals for treatment. Now, I would not.
The ones that got there probably got no treatment because they were dead.
Well, the thing of it is, what I'm wondering is how many of those victims were treated at the scene that never made it to the hospital?
Well, we don't know that, do we?
Yeah, right.
Do we know how?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean,
but,
you're postulating something we can't prove. Yes, they could have been treated, and there should be evidence of being treated during the autopsy.
And
in other words, if they find a patient intubated, they should obviously describe it. If they see an IV site, they should describe it.
EKG pads, evidence
Correct.
of tracheotomies, those kinds of things were indicated. I guess I expected to see that there would be. The FIT report says 27 victims were transported to local area hospitals. I guess I would expect the majority of them to have some sort of work done. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been transported. And then I would also expect some of the ones who died at the scene, because I know some were around the medical tent at the venue, they would have gotten some sort of treatment. I guess I would have expected the medical treatment number in the autopsies to be higher than the 27 victims who were transported to the local hospitals, is all I'm saying. That just seems strange to me.
Maybe or maybe not. It's hard to say.
Okay. All right. Let's go to the Excel spreadsheet, Jason, if we could.
Yeah. Got it right there.
Okay.
I've made PDFs of each of these, Paladin. What I'm going to do is after the show, I'll put links so that people can download them and go over your reports on their own.
Okay. All right. Let's go through the first one, the autopsy duration by doctor. Okay.
This is the one that starts with 21, and then it says the doctor's name, date of death, time of death, autopsy date, autopsy.
No,
hours.
That would be the other one. No, the other one. The first one should be 55.
Okay, let me make sure I've got that one ready here. Okay, wait a minute. That one I don't have ready. So you sent that to me this morning?
Yeah, I sent you that file, and it's another tab. If you call up the Excel spreadsheet, it's a different tab. It's a tab that says autopsy.
I see that. Okay,
Yeah,
sure. Give me 1 second.
Okay. And what I've done, Dr. Rudd, based on the ones who have indicated what time they did the autopsy, I have scheduled their time between autopsies. In other words, based on they started one at 7:55, then they started another one at 8:40 and 9:20 and so on. And I've listed the time of the autopsy. And then I've also indicated to the right of that, when Jason calls that up, the ballistics, if there were ballistics that they found and documented and gave to the LVMPD, if there were other injuries that they indicated and documented, and also if there were if they performed an internal exam. So this is it's very interesting.
Okay, I've got.
Do we have that?
Yes, I've got it right here.
Okay. And can you see that, Dr. Rudd?
You know what? I didn't send it to Dr. Rudd. I'll email that right now. It might take him a moment to get it. Why don't you?
It'll take longer because it's going to take longer because I'm on a pad, and these things. I think I have a virus on it, so it takes longer to screw around with me.
Okay.
Well, we just go ahead and describe. You can just read it to me.
Okay. The first one is Dr. Marzouk's. He did 2 autopsies. The first one he did was October 4th at 12:30 a.m. And he found ballistics. He documented other injuries, and he also did an internal exam. The next autopsy that he did was at 3:15 a.m. So basically, you've got 2 hours and 45 minutes between
for two
between
autopsies.
yeah, yeah. So the first one was
So it took him for two autopsies. It took him 2 hours and 45 minutes.
no. The first autopsy took him 2 hours and 45 minutes. We do not have an end time for the second one. There we go, Jason. It's up there. I don't know if you can see that. Okay, now we go to Dr. Corneal. And the first autopsy she performs was October 2nd at 7:55. She found ballistics and she did a full internal exam, and it took her 45 minutes. The next
people
one,
are faster than others.
Yeah. Okay. The next,
and it could be due to the type of wound. It might have been a single wound or something.
Yeah, it was, but she did the Y incision, and she resected the organs and did all the organ work too. So 45 minutes.
She should have done. That's another. Some pathologists are superb. I mean, they're very good. The actual term of autopsy of a pathologist is actually he's a autopsy surgeon.
Right.
So that's the real term. So these people some pathologists are superb autopsy surgeons. They can be very, very quick.
Okay, so she did 45 minutes, 40 minutes, 55 minutes, then 40 minutes on the next one that was an internal exam, then 35 minutes and 40 minutes and there was no internal exam, then 45 minutes and 20 minutes and no internal exam. She took an hour and 15 minutes, no internal exam. And then she took 25 minutes and 30 minutes with no internal exam.
Okay. But where were the gunshots?
I don't have them listed on here. They're not on this.
Because if the head was blown off by a bullet, you don't necessarily need to do an internal exam if you found no other bullet holes.
Would you like me to bring up?
You should, just for completeness, you should. Okay, but if you got a head blown off, that's the cause of death. Okay, so we need to know where the bullet was. If this person got shot in the heart and she didn't do an internal examination, that's pathology malpractice.
Well, I can sure do a schedule for that. I just didn't put the bullet wounds on this particular schedule, but I could do that easy enough.
Okay. Well, why don't we look for a moment just at, let's say, autopsy 27 and see what it says?
Yeah, okay.
Okay,
or 32, yeah.
Well, here's 27. And it says, manner of death, homicide. Body is identified by a tag on the right great toe. What are we looking for specifically? The body is that of a normally developed and well-nourished blank female, appearing consistent with the listed age of blank years. Length is 65 inches, so that's 5'5". Weight is 173 pounds. The body is well preserved. The scalp is covered with black hair measuring up to 13 inches on the top of the head. Ears are normally formed with bloody drainage. The earlobes
Okay,
are pierced.
this is of the head. That one is of the head. It's in the first page. Opinion, cause of death, died as a result of a gunshot wound of the head.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now,
right.
What was the other one? 32.
Yeah. That could preclude an internal examination. However, it should have been done. Let's just put it that way. I mean, you're there. You might as well do it. You never know what you might find inside that could assist the family of a potential inheritable disease. You see where I'm going?
Mm-hmm.
You're doing a service. Granted, it's in extenuating circumstances with so many people dead, but at the same time, why not? Okay, but is it wrong? No, it's not wrong. You found out why somebody died, but you should give a full. You're going to charge for the same amount. You might as well do for what you charge.
But of course, if they're overwhelmed, doctor, would that not be a reason for
Correct.
them to maybe not do that
Yes,
type of thing?
Yes.
Okay.
Correct, because you did find the cause of death, and there are no other bullets noted on the torso or the extremities.
Okay, and now I've got autopsy number 9 over here, which is saying gunshot wound to the chest. Based on the autopsy findings and the circumstances surrounding the death as currently understood, cause of death is a gunshot wound of the chest, and the manner of death is homicide. And this was a male.
And they didn't do did they do an internal?
On number 9, Paladin,
I'm switching back and forth between a bunch of them
this took
here.
30 minutes.
Well, we don't know that one. We don't have a time. We don't have the time when it was finished. However, I do have one here.
For autopsy 9, you had 30 minutes, I thought.
No, because that was the last one that she did that night, and she didn't have a time when she ended. What I did was I took the time that it took to do the autopsies. I used the time that she started the prior one till the time she started the next one, and I used that as the time. Go to number 3. Go to autopsy 3. Yeah. This one is a gunshot wound to the back, and she did not do an internal exam.
Body is
Just
unclad. Well, this is also different in terms of the way it's written. It doesn't follow the format of the
they're
others.
all different. Yeah, they're different. They're all different, which is kind of frustrating. If you're trying to go pull out certain information, you really have to go through them several times to find what you're looking for.
But doesn't it seem strange, Paladin and Dr. Rudd, doesn't it seem strange that if you're typing up all these documents, why would one person type 2 documents so dramatically differently? I would think you'd be, in a practice of sort of formatting your document the same way.
I agree. I can't answer that, and I certainly can't answer why somebody gets shot in the back and they don't do an autopsy. How do they know what organ caused their death? Was it the severing of the spinal cord? Was it hitting the heart? Was it hitting the liver?
Well,
you have
okay.
I don't get it.
What I did, though, doctor, to indicate that there was no internal exam done, I didn't count an internal exam if they did not do the full Y incision and do an internal exam, okay? If they just did an internal exam on the gunshot wound, no matter where it was, whether it was the head or the back, typically if it was the back or the chest, it was in the body. If they did not do an internal exam, they didn't even list it. But she listed a couple of times where she did an internal exam, but she called an internal exam the examination of the head wound when it was a head wound.
Yeah, that's appropriate. You can do it if the death is due to a bullet in the head and nowhere else on the body. You don't necessarily have to do a internal examination of the torso.
Okay. So then why would she do? Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know.
Why would she do internal exam?
If you got a gunshot wound to the back, you still do a Y-shaped incision. I don't know why she did that.
Okay. Because there are some where she did do a Y incision. Okay, call up 48, Jason.
Coming up.
This is a gunshot wound to the back. Okay, it says it on the first page. This blank-year-old female, and then they blanked out her name, redacted her name, died as a result of a gunshot wound of the back. Okay, and then on page 4. The bottom of page 4 starts the internal exam. She does the body cavities. She does the cardiovascular system. She does the respiratory system. She does the hematobiliary system, the hemolymphatic system, the endocrine system, the gastrointestinal system. I mean, she goes through all these systems, the neck, the musculoskeletal, the head.
Why is this one so complete?
So that one is this is my question, doctor. Why would they do a full-blown autopsy on some and not on all of them? I just don't understand this.
And where's the
And
Nor do I.
signature here? The signature is up top on this one. I mean, the format is just all over the place.
It's wrong. All I can say.
Okay.
Now, without reading it and having it in front of me and looking at the pictures of the decedent, which of course you guys won't get.
Yeah.
Nobody
Right.
gets the pictures.
Right.
The only way you can get the pictures, by the way, you can get the pictures of any autopsy if you get the immediate family to release them to you.
Okay.
Just to let
Why would
people
they
know
do
that. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. 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 Okay. All
Well,
right.
you know, Paladin, you might in fact find some of these. We could look into that because perhaps some of the family members are dissatisfied with the investigation or.
Yeah. 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 I mean, that's something to look into. Okay. Let's go down. Let's go down to LS. Okay. LR is the. Oh, well, we've got Dr. Hodge. Let's look at his three. His are down at starting at line 34. He started his autopsy at 12:40, his first one. He did not do an internal exam, and it was 2 hours and 15 minutes before he did the next one. The next one he did, it started at 2:55 a.m. He did do an internal exam, and that one took 2 hours and 25 minutes. So, I guess I don't know, maybe he's slower. I don't know. But I mean,
I might be on the wrong page here. You're looking at LS. I see his first one starting 10:35 a.m.
No, JH
on
on line 34, if you can call it. Well, no, you don't have line 34. Okay. It would be after JC, after all of hers, it would be then, if you're looking in the second column, it would be JH. That would be the doctor, Dr. Hodge.
Is that him there? Sorry, because when I made them PDFs, I lost the, let me go back to your Excel thing here.
Columns. Okay.
So you're saying line 34.
Yeah, on the Excel spreadsheet.
It's 1:28 p.m. is what I see.
Well, that's the time of death. The time of the autopsy is October 4th, 12:40. Okay, so
I see it. No, we've got it right here.
So that one at 12:40, he did not do an internal exam. That took 2 hours and 15 minutes when he started the next one. And so we don't know if he could have done that in an hour and took a break for an hour and 15 minutes. You just don't know because they didn't put an ending time. But the next one started at 2:55, and he did do an internal exam, and that one took 10 minutes longer than the one that possibly he did that didn't take an internal exam. Okay, so anyway, I'm Dr. Rudd. I'm going through these, and it didn't make a whole lot of sense based on the fact that I guess I expected them all to do an internal exam, do the Y incision, and do an internal exam. And I think, Jason, when you and Laura were out there, Laura got information that they didn't do a full autopsy on how many people? 28?
What I heard was approximately half, but I was not on the phone. Laura was on the phone next to me in the car.
So this is, I mean, doing this analysis, that would bear that out. Okay, let's pull up autopsy 6, if we could.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, this one was done by Dr. Sims, who is a DO, and the cause of death was a gunshot wound to the right upper chest. Okay. He indicates his internal exam or his external exam. He does an inventory of the gunshot wounds. And then on page 5 of 8, at the bottom of page 5, he starts his internal exam, and he gives us how much the heart, the lungs, the liver, the spleen, the left kidney, the right kidney, and the brain weigh. And then he goes through the body cavities, the neck organs, and so on. He does a complete exam. And as you can see on this schedule, he started that one at 2:15, and the next one that he performed was at 2:30. So that means that he did that exam in 15 minutes, internal and external.
Wait a minute. He started one at one time, started one at the other. Does he have completion times?
No, he doesn't. But he started one at 2:15 p.m. He performed an internal exam, a complete internal exam, and an external exam. And then the next one he started was at 2:30, 15 minutes later.
But are there completion times?
No, there's no completion times.
Okay. All right. A pathologist, if he has a diener, can be doing two at one time. So he can start one at 2:15. He can start one 15 minutes later. Sometimes the diener will take out various parts for him to examine separately at the table. So if they did an external exam where they know where the bullet went and where it went, he can do two at once. He should have a completion time. Okay. I hope I'm making myself clear. If it's an obvious gunshot wound, they know it hit the heart and went through the body. Okay, so he starts one at 2:15. They open him up. Oh, there's the bullet hole. It's at the chest. It goes through the heart and it exits the back of the individual. Then he can turn to the diener and say, okay, we know the cause of death here. Will you please dissect out everything else, and I will review it at the table later. He walks over 15 minutes later, starts the other one. That might be an easier one too. So you got to be very careful with that. Unfortunately, he doesn't have a completion time. I think if the completion time was put in, you would see that he took longer than 15 minutes.
Okay, and should he then indicate in the report that he had a diener helping him? Because the only one who indicated...
Generally, anybody who is in that autopsy suite should be listed, including law enforcement. Okay. It should be. Okay?
So what?
It should be.
Yeah.
To be thorough means you tell everyththing. Okay. And again, if it's not done, it's sloppy. I don't care what people think.
Yeah. Okay. Because Dr. Corneal was the only one. She did 21 autopsies. She indicated that there was always a technician with her. She even gave the first name of the two technicians. Dr. Marzouk indicated that he had witnesses that were LVMPD personnel. Okay, and he was of the 58 autopsies, he was the only one that indicated that there were witnesses in there that were law enforcement. Okay, we had 21 that were done with an assistant, which Dr. Corneal indicated, and the rest of them don't mention anyone else being in the room. So that's why it drew my attention when Dr. Sims is doing these autopsies in such a quick fashion, and he doesn't indicate that there's anybody in the room helping him. I mean, if you read the report, you're thinking he's doing this all by himself. No, so that's why I brought that up.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So at the bottom of that sheet there, Jason, I have that 30 autopsies were done in less than 2 hours. 21 of those 30 were done in less than an hour. 9 were done in 90 minutes or less. 5 were done 2 hours or more, and the other 24 is unknown because the doctor, Dr. Roquero, did not put. Did I do my math there correctly? Yeah, Dr. Roquero didn't give us a time of autopsy.
Sorry, Paladin, which document has that summary?
That would be the autopsy duration by doctor. It's down at the bottom.
Okay.
It would be under the column where I'm putting in the times of the autopsies.
Right.
It would be at the bottom. I just did a recap.
Oh, I see it.
We had
I see it.
30, yeah, 30 that were less than 2 hours. 21 of the 30 were less than an hour. We had 9. The other 9 of the 30 were done in 90 minutes or less. You had 5 that were done 2 hours or more, and then there are 24 that we don't have any idea how long it took them.
Got it.
So to
recap, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So anyway, I just wanted to go over that because it just seems strange to me, Dr. Rudd, that all these numbers are just all over the board as far as how long it takes. And I tried to compare the internal exams because as I was going through, I see some of them didn't do internal exams. So I'm thinking, okay, because, that's a pretty, I mean, I would think that takes some time. They have to cut out the organs. They got to make the Y incision, cut the organs, weigh them. And if they don't have anybody helping them, which they didn't indicate, then I thought that's pretty quick to be doing these, when some of these other doctors who indicated that they did do a full exam, it took them 2 hours or more to do those kinds of exams. So that's just
Yeah,
why I thought it was just strange.
right, right, right.
Yeah.
Again, you have to analyze where the gunshot wound is. If it's to the head, there'll be a more thorough exam, and not to do an internal examination below the neck of the trauma to the head is technically correct, but you should do a complete exam. And if you have an assistant who is a professional diener, once the pathologist opens up Y-shaped and they remove when they remove the organs, it's done with it's interesting. You sever the esophagus near the opening of the mouth, and you sever the rectum, and you literally lift all the organs out, and you hold it as if you just shot a duck. Okay, you literally have every organ on one piece of tissue, and then you put it on the table, and you can quickly dissect it out and see if there's any pathology. And if you have a diener, they can do that in 20 minutes. So time has to be analyzed with: is there an assistant? Is it a trained assistant? Where's the gunshot wound? If there's no autopsy, if there's generally not going to be pathology in somebody who's 23 years old and got shot in the head. So
Right.
you can dissect out the organs pretty quickly. So we'd have to see number one, where was the gunshot wound, as to why they didn't do an internal. I'd love to know why somebody got shot in the back and they didn't do an internal.
Yeah.
How
So
do
would
they know
I.
what organ?
Right.
What organ was hit?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
How did they
Okay.
die?
Yeah. 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 Okay. Let's go to the other one, Jason. Yeah.
Gentlemen, we're approaching 2 hours here, and I've got a dinner coming up in 20 minutes.
Okay. So we got one more that we can go through here, Dr. Rudd, and then we'll let you go. The
Which
rigor
document
mortis.
would you like, Paladin?
The rigor mortis analysis.
And that was what, a Microsoft Word document?
No, that was the other Excel spreadsheet. That was the other tab on the Excel
The other
spreadsheet.
tab, right.
Yeah.
Time of death, autopsy starts with 55? No.
21, the one you had before.
Right. Okay. There we go. Got it up.
There you go. Okay. Okay, Dr. Rudd, I don't know if you can see this, but what I've done is I've scheduled the autopsy number, the doctor, the date of death, the time of death, the autopsy date, the time of the autopsy, and whether the doctor indicated that the body was in rigor mortis. And then the last column, I have hours to autopsy, meaning the based on the time of death, from the time of death to the time of the autopsy, how many hours elapsed. Okay. And for the ones that we could come up with a time of death and a time of autopsy, and that was on one doctor, Dr. Sims, he has, after 34 hours, he has minimal rigor mortis. Two that were 36 hours, rigor mortis is absent. 37 hours, it's minimal. 38 hours, it's absent. Two at 41 hours that were minimal. One at 42 hours that was absent. One at 44 hours that were minimal. One for 58 hours, one for 59 hours, they were minimal. One at 60 hours that it had passed, and one at 65 hours where it had passed. Now, I don't know if you can see the distribution there in the hours, but we have two autopsies that were done 72 hours after the time of death, and they were still in rigor mortis.
72 hours after death. So that's
3 days.
3 days?
Yeah.
3 days?
Yeah.
That could be possible. That still
Okay.
could be possible.
But we
Remember,
have
it's 1 to 3 days.
right. But if it's absent, I mean, that's according to the notes when you said it takes 24 to 48 hours to get into full and then another 24 to leave. That would at least indicate to me that the 48 hours would be the magic number before the rigor mortis would be passed.
Well, the rigor mortis can occur in 1 to 3 days. If it occurred on day 1 and was full, then on day 2 it starts going out of it.
Okay, but earlier you said it took 24 to 48 hours to get to full rigor mortis after death.
It takes
Is that right?
no, excuse me. It takes 1 to 3 days to full rigor mortis. It can occur full rigor mortis in 1 day. I said it takes 1 to 3 days. I'm not saying it takes 3 days to go to rigor mortis. Rigor mortis can be full in 1 day, or it
Okay.
could be full in 2 days, or it could be full in 3 days. So I may have stated it incorrectly. It takes 1 to 3 days, but it could occur as early as 1 day. So I'm not saying that it takes 72 hours to get the rigor mortis. It can take as short as 24 hours.
Okay.
It
And
depends on what's going on biologically inside a body. As I mentioned before, activity, exercise makes it occur full earlier.
okay. And at what point would it be completely gone?
Well, I'm trying to think. Probably 24 to 48, I think. I can't recall right now.
Okay, so if it gets to full rigor mortis by 24
I
hours.
would say probably 24 to 36 hours. Okay.
After it reaches full rigor mortis?
Correct. So if it reaches full rigor mortis in day 1, then at the end of day 2 or at the end of day 3, it could be coming out of it. Okay. If it takes 72 hours to get full rigor mortis, then on the 4th day it could be coming out, or the 5th day it could be coming out. Now, refrigeration, of course, can harden the body even though you're out of rigor mortis. So unless the pathologist waits for the body to warm up, he may pull the body out, start operating, and say, "Oh, he's in rigor mortis." Well, that's not true because the body's cold.
Right.
Okay, it's like a slab of meat. It's like a slab of meat. You defrost your steaks before you cook it. Well, if you don't wait long enough, you're going to misinterpret a cold body as in rigor mortis.
Okay, but would you expect a body to be fully out of rigor mortis within 36 hours of time of death?
I would say this. Again, rigor mortis occurs either day 1, day 2, day 3. Now, whichever day it's in full, then you have 24 to 36 hours for it to come out. But it's not an all or none phenomena. Some parts of the body, after full rigor mortis, starts losing it. Other parts will take longer to lose it.
Okay, so given everything that I've presented today, based on what you've so eloquently stated as sloppiness, do you find it interesting that two of these doctors, we had 6 doctors do autopsies, and only 2 doctors had bodies that were not in rigor mortis, and the other 4 all had bodies that were in rigor mortis, even though a couple of the bodies were 72 hours after the time of death and they were still in rigor mortis? Wouldn't you expect that distribution to be more evenly done?
I would think so, but I don't know. It's hard to say without, examining the entire case individually.
No, I understand that. I guess I'm thinking that if it takes 24 hours for the body, the soonest it would be to full rigor mortis, the soonest. And then another 24 hours for it to get out of rigor mortis. That would be 48 hours. That would be the soonest it would be out of rigor mortis. Well, we've got some here that are absent. The doctor describes the rigor mortis as absent after 36 hours. which would indicate to me that that person died before the official time of death. That's what my point. And I know you may not want to say that. That's just what jumped out
what
at
I'm
me.
saying is that I don't have the facts in front of me. It's very questionable, okay, for me to interpret this, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And again, I don't know. I need to have the stuff in front of me.
Gentlemen, I think what we should do at this point is perhaps break, and then maybe in the future we could do another show if Dr. Rudd would like, and if he has time to review the material, perhaps we can delve deeper in. I think this has been an incredible exploration of the information. Doctor, if you could give us a summary, obviously not speaking specifically to some of these points, and I'm sorry to interrupt, Paladin, but I'm sensitive to the doctor's schedule.
Fine.
What do you think the overall consensus of this information would indicate about this body of autopsies and the activities in general of the coroner's office there in Clark County in response to this October 1st mass shooting event?
Well, it's difficult for me to say. I would say that I had reviewed the autopsies, and the cause of death seems to be clear. I could say that, there's nothing there that indicated to me that it wasn't done properly. I fault them with not following a protocol and doing a complete job. Okay. I wish I could send, and I'm not in my office. I actually had a case that was sent out to a medical examiner's office on a child abuse case. This thing read like a textbook. It was so thorough. They called in a forensic anthropologist. They called in a forensic dentist. They called in this and that on an abusive trauma to a child. It was one of the best autopsies I've ever seen forensically. These autopsies got the cause of death, but they didn't do a complete job. And when you don't do a complete job and you don't follow protocols, people become suspicious. And I think you have to eliminate suspicions by doing an autopsy the right way all the time. If you don't do a Y-shaped incision because there's a head wound, that's fine. Okay, as long as you document the external part that you're not going to cut, you're going to document it with photographs ad nauseum. I would say they did an okay job, but that's all I'm going to say.
Okay. All right. I think that's fair. That's fair enough. I did want to go over Paddocks, but we don't have enough time. Dr. Rudd, can we get you on again, and we could go over ballistics and some of these other issues that maybe we could wrap up so I can move on from the autopsies? Would you be willing to come back on and spend some time with us, some more time?
Sure. But give me the data at least 3 days in advance.
I'll do that, Doctor. I'll work with Paladin to make sure you have comprehensive reports well before we begin, and we can even have a call beforehand to discuss that. For this call, I wanted you to see the information cold so that we could get your just, spontaneous reaction to Paladin's question. And I really appreciate your time and your willingness to come on the program so much, Doctor. Have a wonderful weekend, and we will speak to you again soon, okay?
Thank you, Dr. Rudd.
Thank you, Dr. Rudd.
I really appreciate your time on this. This is just fantastic. I really do appreciate it.
Very good.
Take care, Doctor. Bye-bye. Well, Paladin, that was a really comprehensive overview with Dr. Rudd. I'm delighted we were able to have him. Is there anything else you wanted to share with everybody before we wrap it up for this early evening?
No, I wanted to go through the Paddock information, but that's probably going to take longer than what we have, so maybe we can save that for next time.
Yeah. Let's wait till we have the doctor back and give him some of that info.
Yeah, because I think this whole thing with Paddock and the autopsy, I've spotted some things that I haven't seen anybody talk about yet, and I would like to go over those because it's just very strange, just some very strange things, and the whole timeline for Paddock, and did they kill him or did he kill himself? Did they observe him shoot himself or not? And this anomaly with, not calling the time of death till noon the next day, when you have various officers of LVMPD swearing under oath that when they breached the door of Suite 135 that he was already dead.
Right.
And as you heard Dr. Rudd say, sometimes they'll take law enforcement's information and put the time of death. And I mean, those search warrants said numerous times, I mean, I read through all of them, and numerous times they indicated that Paddock was dead when they got in. They breached the room, which was 11:40 or 11:38 or whenever that was. So why they made it 12 hours later is beyond me. In addition to the fact that, well, there's just some interesting things in the autopsy that we can talk about the next time. Hopefully, we can do this within a week or two, because we're working on a lot of other things, a lot of deep background dive on Paddock. We're coming up with some interesting information relating to his associates and business partners that nobody has talked about. And we're connecting some dots on some other things that I think everybody is going to be very surprised to hear about, because I wonder why our great fake news mainstream media hasn't put a microphone in front of these people's faces and asked them about their business partner, Stephen Paddock. So anyway, I think we could probably end with that. I appreciate your time in providing me a platform to talk about this. And I just want to say that I do have a YouTube channel, Paladin WH, where I periodically just put little snippets out about this in between our shows. Mm-hmm. But I appreciate you providing the time and the platform for me to be able to put this information out, because I think we all need to work together. And hopefully this will spur some research and investigation done by some of the listeners. I think Crowdsource the Truth is a great business model. And I think that if we can get this information out through your platform, and we can get other people working on it and assisting with all of this, I think the quicker we're going to get a resolution to what happened in Vegas.
Absolutely. Paladin, thank you for your time, your expertise, and your ongoing support. I really appreciate you, and this is just amazing research. It's always great to have experts in their particular fields come together. And of course, for people who might have joined later in the broadcast, Dr. Rudd is not one of the pathologists who participated in these autopsies. He of course, appears with us on Crowdsource the Truth as an expert witness, almost as if, Paladin, if we were having some sort of a court proceeding about this, we would ask a doctor with expertise in the field what he thinks of this work. And of course, again, without being directly involved and having lots and lots of time to study, any doctor, I think, would be somewhat reluctant, as Dr. Rudd was, to pass definitive judgment. It's always interesting to me when you speak to doctors and lawyers and engineers. These are people who are usually pretty reluctant to provide definitive conclusions, simply because they deal in areas of unknown outcomes. And so, trying to nail something down definitively is almost always a losing proposition. But given all that, I think Dr. Rudd confirmed a lot of the beliefs that these autopsies were really not done up to the standards of what someone would expect.
I fully agree with you, and that's why I wanted to take the first hour to ask Dr. Rudd various questions about the procedures and processes that a coroner or a medical examiner would take, because I wanted all the listeners to understand what is normal, and then review the autopsies that were done in Vegas, and to see how out of the ordinary a lot of this stuff is. And this doesn't even cover the fact that we don't have ballistics, we don't have x-rays, we don't have photographs. I mean, the Las Vegas Review-Journal, I've got to tell you, their legal department really took a dive on this one, because not only did they not get the identities of the victims, they also didn't get all this backup information that is what is included in an autopsy report. So and see, the thing of it is, where I'm going with this is, there is a reason that Funderburg redacted the information. He does not want us to know who these victims are, and there's got to be a reason, and we're trying to figure that out. I have an excellent researcher working on this, and I think we've identified all 58 victims as
Amazing.
far as matching them to the autopsies. And so, as you can imagine, that is going to take us down another road as far as verification of who those people are, where they died, when they died, and all those kinds of things to verify this, because I don't see any reason why Funderburg wants to keep that secret. There's got to be a reason for that. So we're
Right.
going to figure that out.
Well, and of course, when Laura Loomer and I spoke to Mr. Fudenberg, John Fudenberg, of course, is the Clark County coroner, he stated that his reason for not revealing the identities was strictly for the privacy of the families, and people can review that video on the original Crowdsource the Truth channel that has my name associated with it, Crowdsource the Truth, Jason Goodman channel. And I do want to remind people, Paladin, that, you know, Crowdsource the Truth is community sponsored. And I want to apologize to our sponsors on Patreon. Today, and this video was to be the first delivered to Patreon with a new live streaming service. I've fired Crowdcast. That was not working well at all. And unfortunately, I made a mistake in setting up the new service. So I'm going to do some extensive testing and make sure that our next broadcast will not have that problem. Tomorrow we've got Quinn Michaels returning, and Quinn always has amazing information. I want to thank Paladin. I want to remind people to hopefully go to patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. And it would be wonderful if people could become sponsors of the channel. It's going to allow me to expand into other methods that are, you know, removed from YouTube, that are hopefully not as susceptible to some of the malicious strikes we've been getting. I think people know who the likely suspects for striking these videos are. I'm just trying to bring experts, information, research, this type of thing that Paladin is doing, and bringing in Dr. Rudd and all that kind of stuff. And certainly if people want that to continue, please become a sponsor, even if it's just for $1 a month, $5 a month, $10 a month. It makes a huge difference. You can also make a one-time sponsorship payment at paypal.me/crowdsourcethetruth. And people should, of course, be subscribing to Paladin WH on YouTube. That's Paladin White Hat, and that's his YouTube channel, where you can see additional information about his research into the Las Vegas shooting and other matters. Paladin, thanks so much for joining me. You're becoming a close confidant, a good friend, and obviously an amazing resource for information. Anything else before we wrap it up?
Yeah, just one other thing. It's interesting what Funderburg told you and Laura when you were out there. It was interesting because he was being sued at that point in time for prior autopsy information that he did not release.
The office was being sued, not him.
Yeah,
personally.
and he lost. And he
lost that. Right.
He lost that case. So he just has no reason why redacting this. And you know, the Las Vegas Review-Journal agreed to accept these redacted, which is it's just very disappointing, because it defeats the whole purpose. So that's very disappointing to me. And one other thing, Jason, I think when we did the show with Cullen, I indicated that all of the autopsies were signed on December 20th, and I was incorrect. I wanted to correct that. There was one autopsy where it looks like they couldn't identify the victim, so they had to do a dental, it looks like a DNA or a dental exam. And so that autopsy was signed on December 27th. So I apologize for that error. 57 were signed all on the same day, December 20th. The 58th one was signed on December 27th. So I did want to correct that error.
Right. And we also can't discount the possibility that the Las Vegas Review-Journal may have accepted this information as it was, in part due to the influence from advertisers. I've got to imagine that MGM is doing a lot of advertising in the Las Vegas Review-Journal, and we did hear from one of the members of the mainstream press that they just can't go to some of these topics because of that reason. So all the more motivation for people to sponsor what we're doing here and get behind independent journalism, whoever it is that you choose to support. Paladin, I want to thank you for joining me today. I want to wish everybody a great weekend. Happy Friday the 13th. Generally not a happy kind of thing. But go watch a Friday the 13th movie or something like that. Thanks everybody for tuning in. I'll see you tomorrow.